Hi, my name is Teresa Walters. I will be talking today about the lesson that I wrote called Rangeland Analysis. I teach at Loop City High School in Loop City, Nebraska, which is located in central Nebraska. I am also an adjunct professor at Central Community College, based out of Grand Island, Nebraska. Um, my project was a lesson that I wrote to um, use in my environmental science course, which is a dual credit course through Central Community College out of Grand Island. And my project followed the 5E lesson plan. And so I have here just a copy of kind of an overview of my lesson, and then I'll click on each one of these here to kind of show you each part to it. Just kind of an overview. I have my learning objectives there, talking about interdependent relationships and ecosystems, and to gather, analyze, and communicate evidence of interdependent relationships and ecosystems. So the engage part, the students are going to look at different pictures of rangelands and make observations and speculate about why they are different. And so I'll get that opened up here. And so what might account for the difference between the two sites? Let me back up here. So rangelands, I had had them look at each rangeland site, record their observations, and then discuss and answer questions, kind of an overview. So here is site A that they looked at, and then site B, and then they wrote down what similarities do you see between the two sites, what differences do you see between the two sites, and then they discussed them with their partner, and then we kind of discussed as a group as well. And then we also discussed about what might account for the differences between those two sites. Then the explore for rangeland analysis. We went out to a couple different sites and we record the information, the day it was, what's the air temperature, what's the sky conditions. We recorded like the total number of shrubs at each site, the total number of trees, except for red cedar. We did those separately. And then we had some summary questions. So here's kind of a sample of the data tables we use that they filled in. And then we have again the total number. Up here we have the different types, like this is um, an elm tree or whatever. They listed those. Then we kind of talked about what was the predominant grass, the predominant forb, predominant tree, predominant bird if we saw any. And then do we see any relationship between the plants and what types of birds that you found there? Okay, let me go back here. So then back to my slideshow, we did the engage. I showed you that. We did the explore. I showed you the document for that. And then the explain one, uh, the partner, they made a list of the similarities and differences between the two rangeland areas that were analyzed. They discussed those similarities and differences, and then they picked one difference they observed and kind of discussed possible explanations. And then they did some research and found some evidence to support or refute their explanation. And then they shared the findings with the class. Elaborate. Let me get that one pulled open. So they had several pictures they looked at and they tried to determine if these birds are present, how would you label their conservation rating as low concern, declining, steep declining. So we have some birds there that they took a look at. And then they kind of summarized up like which birds indicate a low concern, what plants might be found there, what birds indicated decline rangeland, what types of plants might be there, what birds indicated a steep declining rangeland, what types of plants would we find there. And then they thought about the question your neighbor is trying to decide whether or not to use um, treatments on their land. How would you convince them to use that? And then they share that as a class, what they decided. And then evaluate. They worked with a partner and did some research. I get that document open here. Um, they picked one of the rangeland birds and they created a presentation using Google Slides or Canva, had the scientific name, common name, what habitat, what types of plants, animals would be there, what's the climate like, precipitation, temperature range. They had to include pictures of the bird and the habitat. What would their conservation rating be based on the bird that was there and the plants? And then what treatment would you recommend if you were based on the type of bird and plants that you found there? So overall, it was a pretty fun activity for the students. Anytime you can go outside and do hands-on things, it's always fun to do those. Um, as far as identifying the plants, we weren't able to use the apps. So in the future, I will be able to have it so that we can use those. I was going to use them on my phone, but I have an old phone, and so it wouldn't let me download the app onto it. So we mainly just kind of took pictures, and then we tried to identify what we could out on the field, and then what we couldn't identify, we went back and researched and figured out what the other ones were. So it's a fun activity. I plan to use it again next year. I might make a few adjustments to it with make sure I have the app available. But other than that, most I will keep the same. One other thought was in their presentation to open it up to other types of presentations.